FTTB Music Podcast.
Hello.
This is Louis Sean calling. Well, actually, it's Lee calling, isn't it?
It's Lee now.
Lee, yeah.
Oh.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Easter.
Happy Easter. Happy birthday to me.
Yeah.
And welcome to spring.
Yeah.
I missed one? Well, I missed a whole raft of religious ones, but
Yeah. Well, welcome back to the podcast.
three Saints days.
He once actually stayed around since our last podcast, which was Christmas. And actually, bizarrely, usually if you stayed around the Christmas podcast, you would get the New Year podcast, which featured our best ofs for the year. But
it's only a week later. What happened?
Didn't even go into that one, either. That'll be coming very briefly in a small special, kind of like 10-minute podcast.
Excellent. For our Ko-fi and Patreon subscribers. Imagine if we were like that, though. Seriously,
God,
listener.
yes.
Seriously.
Yes. That's the Apple podcast exclusive, the extra bit. Yeah.
It's not. We're giving it away for free. We can't give it away for free.
Yeah. As we've proved.
As we've proved.
Yeah.
Indeed.
So, this is podcast 1, unbelievably, of 2022. But it's the same formula, as
Indeed.
always.
Yeah.
6 albums, us talking crap. So, this time around we have the debut album by Wet Leg, Gone Wet Leg. We have the certainly not debut album by Duran, Future Past. We have another album by a band we've reviewed a few albums by now, I think 3. Sault, called Air.
Mm.
A debut album by a band called Yard Act, called The Overload. I think the 6th album from a rock band, Rolo, Tomassi, named after obviously a character in a film. No one should know that. And Frank Turner Hardcore, or FTHC.
Oh, I did wonder. I was like, too lazy to do the research, but I thought it's Frank Turner something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to start with a debut album from Rian Teasdale and Hester Chambers,
Nice.
who made a huge, it has to be said, there have been very few bands recently that have made as big a splash globally than they did last summer with their debut single, Chaise Lounge, which beautifully plucked lyrics from the film Mean Girls in a very, very humorous manner. Quickly followed up by the song Wet Dream, which was, exactly about what you think it was about. So the question is, Pete, could an album live up to the promise of those 2 singles or not?
With this album, obviously it's been hyped, and they featured on the Sounds of 2022.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. Long list as well, and we're only just outside the top 5, I believe. Or were they on the top 5? I can't remember now.
No, we usually do that every year as well. But
I remember we did it, but we never actually did it. But there we go. So this album, objectively, you sort of look at it, you think, okay, so here's a band, they're being really hyped, and when the album comes out, there's publicity everywhere. And this is the music industry doing what it normally does. It's just like, well, okay, so indie rock is now cool again. And on the back of bands like Wolf Alice, female vocalists and leads and musicians is also cool again. So we, the music industry, are like, well, where do we find more like this? We've got to keep digging. But do you know what? It's bloody fantastic. It's bloody fantastic. I was one who was sceptical because I saw the hype, I saw the name. I obviously heard the singles last year, and I thought, this could be okay. This could be okay.
Yeah.
But let's see where the album is, because I'm a music snob of a certain age now. But it is absolutely, I loved it. I absolutely love this album. It's a great indie rock, indie pop album. There are very few tracks on here that I didn't really enjoy. The usual sort of filler and killer ratio. Particularly on a debut, it's all filler. Sorry, it's all killer. Oh my god. We're out.
Fever effect.
Out of practice. Can we edit that out? It's all killer, said Peter. And it shows the singles you've obviously mentioned. Just all the way through, there's just little touches. I think it's the track. It's what's it called? I don't want to go out. And there's like a little riff by David Bowie on there with the sort of man who said no.
Yes, Rise of the Earth. Yes, or possibly the Nirvana version, depending on.
Well, it depends how you look at it.
They're
I'm
an
sure,
age that maybe they're.
I like to think it's the Bowie version, but you're right. It's probably Kurt Cobain. So there's that on there. That I'm convincing has a touch of sort of the beach rock of the sort of Beach Boys, but harder. And then lyrically, it's just endless. It's just brilliant takedowns of people, events, relationships, blokes normally, crap ones. Your mum. It's like that lyric about your mum on your mum.
Yes.
Your mum's really proud of you now. Piece of shit. We've all met a guy like that. Imagine being a girl and meeting a guy like that. I mean, it's just, it's awful, but it's brilliant at the same time.
It's like I was thinking, if you haven't, you're that guy.
If you know, you are that guy if you don't know what they're talking about. Exactly. The chant in supermarket where it's like, buy one, get one free! It's just, I love it. It's just the little things like that because, it's just superbly put together. Lyrically brilliant, musically brilliant. It feels like after all these years of doing this podcast, the music that of my youth, oh God, I'm so old, is now coming back into fashion. I'm loving it.
Well, yeah, I know what you're saying there because you definitely it's if you're a 90s indie,
which I was
fan,
very much so.
This is the album, isn't it?
Yeah,
it is.
Yeah. And it is Nirvana rather than David Bowie, isn't it?
Yeah, but also it takes a thing, saying the female front person kind of thing. There's elements of Elastica,
Sleeper,
Echo Belly, even Lush at times.
Maybe we'll mention the band we saw the other night, or the artist we saw the other night, Skunk Anansie, Courtney Love. It's all there.
Yeah, and what I liked about the album, as you say, is that
it's Baby Queen, by the way. Yeah. Was the artist we saw the other night.
It was very good.
We've been too busy for podcasting. Yes, we've been going out.
But as you said, what's good about this album is that lyrically, it's as actually it's a theme on a couple of the albums we're reviewing as a podcast. Yeah. There's a very good sense of dry humour running through this record.
Yeah.
I think on Angelica, which I really like, this guy there at the end, the ambience was overrated at the party. I wanted to run away before it even started. So I really like that kind of whole kind of thing. Yeah. As you say, the thing to Bowie on I Don't Want to Go Out. Loving You, which is one of the slower numbers on the record, which is about a relationship, which is also one of my favourite songs on the record. Really, really love.
Yeah.
So Your Mom is just
awesome.
It's just so great. And as you say, this is also a thing about this podcast where we've got several albums on this podcast that do the thing that I always rattle on about and love. This is 36 minutes long, kind of like zips through, and it means that you almost don't get an opportunity to kind of go, oh, it's dragging a bit here, it's getting a bit, oh, it's finished.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird because obviously when I was younger, you would listen to albums that are 36 minutes long and you'd have that thing going, oh, it dragged a bit in the middle. Now because everything is
it's like an hour long.
Everything is at least an hour long.
Yeah.
If not more. You're just thinking that the dragging in the middle bit is because it's dragging in the middle because it is, just is.
Yeah.
It's fun. Kind of almost life-affirmingly fun. It's just and
it's epic.
It's impossible to watch their videos also without just smiling.
Yeah. So
the tongue is firmly in cheek, and and they've said
believe the hype, and
they've delivered.
Yeah, they have delivered, and when I have friends, relatives quoting back to me, "Oh, Wet Leg, I've heard of them," they've landed.
Very true. So speaking of bands that may have landed, we have some young upstarts called Duran up next with their new album Future Past.
Yeah.
Although surprisingly, in a way, only their 15th album. Although they obviously did have a hiatus for about 7 years, but still, it is the first album since 2015's Paper Gods, which, for those who are interested, we did actually review
didn't we?
podcast 9 of that year. So podcast 9, 2015,
Excellent.
we reviewed the album. And that was the one that was produced by Mark Ronson. But also had lots of people on it and stuff like that. And it was like, I didn't listen back to what we said, but
always a good idea.
no, but my memory is we both thought it was fine.
Okay. Yeah.
But yeah, even within this household, with a huge Duran fan in the house, that is not me, it wasn't really listened to particularly. Oh, things kicking off in our house.
Yes.
The background noise going on if you're listening. There's a Barney going on with other members of my household.
The other artists in Vineland Studios
Yes,
having a collaborative tiff.
indeed. So
I love you guys.
I'll start off this, but this is probably guess where I'm going to go by this statement alone, frankly. So back then, I was never really a fan of Duran in the heyday. But obviously, going back and listening to stuff as you reach a certain age, you eventually, because you knew all this stuff and it was around, so that stuff that you come through, well, it's hard not to like Rio and like the Wolf and stuff when it comes on and stuff like that. It's just there and it's like it's fine. But thinking back to the Paper Gods and thinking, yeah, it was fine, but it wasn't really that bothered. This album came across as actually quite a pleasant surprise, to be honest. What the band has done is, on Future Past, is literally, I think, just that. They produced an album that nods very generously to their past, but also presents a band trying to also look forward and gain a new audience, or at least gain some new audience. And obviously they're not going to be going, oh yes, suddenly there are going to be lots of young people getting into the band, but there's movement in that direction, so that could actually possibly happen based on the material on the record. I would say the first half of the album probably mainly leans towards, this is not totally true because there's tracks that fall across, but the first album more leans towards, I would say, classic Duran, and the second half of the album more towards trying to lean forward slightly more, shall we say. When it kicks off, I think the first half of the album is terrific. I mean, it kicks off with Invisible, which for me is a belter of a tune, has a bit of You to a Kill lurking in the background, which was always one of my favourite Duran songs, it has to be
Definitely
said.
mine.
That's great. Then you go into All of You, which is very much pure and simple classic Duran material. And then into the first of the collabs on the album, which I'm trying to remember the name of suddenly. Give It All Up featuring Tove Lo, which is a cracking tune. Really good pop tune.
Yep.
And then you go on to the what's it called, Anniversary, which is just great. Love Anniversary. Starts with an initial bass line that feels like we're going to start going to Kiss's I was made for loving you, baby, and then kind of suddenly goes off into more of a Union of the Snake kind of vibe. I was thinking, wow, this is actually pretty good. This is Duran. And then you get the next song, which is the title track, which is not the first song where I was going, no, not quite as good, but it's still okay. It's still okay. And as I said to you in a conversation earlier on, there's a bit of it at the start of the chorus where I was thinking, it's reminding me of a Celine Dion song or a Roxette track or something.
That one. Right,
I can't really put my finger on what it was, but I'm fully certain whatever it is that I can't remember, I bet you anyway Diane Warren wrote it. Because, she would have done. So then you go to the second half of the record, you then have literally almost the kind of disco segue, if you like. So, which is the bits with Georgia Moroder on it, which sound like Georgia Moroder disco pop. almost kind of like perhaps also leaning towards the first track of that, listening towards kind of Pet Shop Boy territory. Before those two tracks, if you're mistakenly listening to the extended version of the album, which I did initially, you get Velvet Newton, which is also a kind of semi-instrumental piece that almost sounds George A. Moroder-esque, that kind of leads into those tracks, which is really good. And the rest of the second half of the album, you got a couple of more collabs on Hammerhead, which is quite fun. More Joy, which again starts off kind of George A. Moroder-esque before becoming kind of very Girls on Film-esque, which I really liked. I see before that, there's a couple of tracks that I think Nothing Less, which I thought was one of my favourite tracks on the album, which is one of the ones where Graham Coxon let's rip a bit more. Also nice backing vocals from Simon Le Bon's daughter. And there's also a song on it called Wing, which I personally thought sounded like it was a Bond theme type thing. Certainly in the verse.
Yeah.
Because the chorus went off a bit kind of ultravoxy, but the verse was definitely kind of like, we could still do Bond themes, you know. If you can't give us a chance, we could still do a Bond theme.
We can still knock a Bond theme out.
We could do it. So I'll be honest, having, not sure ever enjoyed a Duran Duran album on release, particularly. This one, hats off. Really good.
I have to say, I struggled with this album to start with. But having listened to it a few times, very much, appreciate what you're saying in terms of the sort of entertainment value, particularly if you're a Duran's fan.
Yes.
For most of the album, I guess I was approaching this from a point of view, I was kind of hoping to hear more of Graham Coxon, but I think that's more in the background anyway, because it's around the songwriting and the sort of structure of things rather than.
Yeah, I think he did. I think
he's definitely there on Nothing Less, absolutely.
And he's there noodling on just but subtle hints of things
subtle,
rather than trying to be Graham Coxon being. That was the thing we were having a discussion earlier on before we came here with somebody else. I was saying it's definitely not going. He's blurred.
No, it's not a Blur album.
He's not blurred Duran Duran.
No, it's not. No, exactly.
Duran Duran.
So if you're a Blur Coxon fan, forget it. It's a Duran fan you're in. But you're absolutely right in terms of View to Kill's probably my favourite as well for obvious Bond related reasons. And actually Wing is, I love the dusty sort of laid back sort of post disco feel which is runs through there. Future Past I wasn't that keen on. It's a ballad. It's a bit dull. But really like the collaborations on this album. It also refreshes the sound. The More Joy one was one that I pulled out as one that I really enjoyed. And track 3, which is the one you mentioned, I thought that was very, forgive the pun, very Pet Shop Boys-esque in terms of the sort of dance track behind it. I thought that was very good. So the 80s throwbacks I can sort of take or leave, but the more sort of pop funk bringing it forward in terms of the sound, I enjoyed more. If you love Duran Duran, you'll like this album, maybe. But if you were enticed in by the sort of Graham Coxon angle, then maybe not.
Okay, moving on to the first of our Yorkshire contingent in the podcast.
Yep.
Debut album by a band from Leeds called Yard Act, The Overload. Some rock of sorts.
Yeah. There's another one that, again, not so much on the sort of wet leg scale, but quite a bit of hype about this when it was released.
There was quite a bit of hype,
a few months ago.
And so much so you actually sent me a text.
I did. I just say, well, forget what we're doing. Let's review this album, please. And I'm glad we did. How would you describe Yard Act to someone that's not? It's very. Sheep on Drugs, but more polished in a kind of... the Fall's in there as well.
I've got the Fall.
Yeah,
I've got the Fall.
definitely.
As one of the bands.
Yeah, it's that sort of recital of a story, but spoken word, to sort of punk / rock sort of behind it. Obviously, very funny, political, satirical, cynical, and really entertaining album. I really enjoyed this album a lot. The more I listened to it, the more I got out of it. It's one of those. So even on the first listen, I really enjoyed it. But the more I listened to it, the more I heard the humour.
There was a lot of humour.
There's a lot of humour. At first, you just think it's if you were new to the act or new to the style, you'd be like, it's this guy's ranting about politics and shit. It's got a real great sense of humour running up throughout. I mean, for me, the tracks to pull out, A Dead Horse, because Brexit never sounded so good. Payday, which Payday, Rich, and the track The Incident, all sort of fetishizing capitalism, but admitting that we all buy into it. You know, we all want our payday, we all want to be rich. But there's a brilliant takedown in the middle of all that of the sort of the venture capitalists and the entrepreneurial, which I loved, given the industry I'm in. Then there's Tall Poppies, which is a brilliant, and we talked about Blur, brilliant sort of almost pulp-esque kind of story, or The Fall again.
Yeah.
Classic small town character, lives a good life, but you can sense the world shrinking around them the longer the song goes on. And then there's this sort of epilogue, or coda at the end, where it's just like, it's a kind of a celebration of that. It's not a cynical takedown of the ordinary man living in the ordinary life. It's a kind of celebration of the ordinary, but actually a sort of bittersweet acceptance that that's how it is for most people, and we just get by and carry on, which which kind of is worth celebrating. Really enjoyed that. And finally, I think the final track for me, 100%, Endurance, the sort of almost the meaning of existence. And again, a celebration of the ordinary, which I don't think we hear that often in pop music these days. But there we go.
No, it's funny when you talk about The Fall. When I first started writing my notes down after the first listen to this album, which was a couple of months ago, because it was a couple of months ago when you sent me that text. Because, strangely enough, we were planning on doing a podcast way before now. But the rest of the albums hadn't been decided at that point, but that was one of the ones we were probably going to do. And I immediately got, from my days of youth, I immediately got The Fall and Ian during the Blockheads.
Yes. Yeah.
Coming from it. And then from current stuff, you've clearly got bands like Sleaford Mods, Black Country New Road, and the band with the female talkie singer that we did last year.
Oh yeah. Dry leg.
Dry
as opposed to wet leg.
Dry something. Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
I apologise.
I'm going to look that up.
I apologise to this person.
Yes, we're going to look that up while we talk.
So it's that similar thing of semi-spoken...
Dry cleaning,
yes.
Yeah.
Semi-spoken kind of delivery of lyrics and stuff. As you say, what's great about lyrics is that it's that great mixture between political, the mundaneness of everyday life, and surrealism, all kind of thrown in together, which is great. As you say, it works really great on songs like Dead Horse, which is like kind of take on British values, our humour, our music, our conversation, and how these things are surviving or not surviving in this current time we live in. And then I think it might be one of my favourite bits of lyrics. I think it might be on the first track.
Favourite lyrics all the way.
They're lovely. The ones about business. Show some respect and listen to my advice. If you don't challenge me on anything, you'll find I'm very nice. Are you listening? I'm actually very fucking nice. think it's that kind of thing of like going,
Yeah.
If you just pipe down and agree with me, you find out we'll get on
alright.
really well.
Yeah.
And that kind of sums up so much of the world we're living in.
Yeah, absolutely. Music and every industry.
Yeah,
Not
also,
just the music industry.
exactly. Also, Land of the Blind, which again is the lyric I noted that I really liked.
Yeah.
Again, the palms greased, never on the ends of the elbows digging the grave
Yes.
to the recently deceased.
Yes.
You're thinking, that is a genius lyric.
And I'm not going to quote the lyric. There's also a lyric about the commemorative 50p. And
Yes.
now let me just borrow that 50p and watch me, the magician, and the 50p.
50p disappear.
Disappear.
Yes. But yeah, as you say, it's again another album that is less than 40 minutes. Another album that kind of rattles through really quickly.
It does.
And very easy to like, very easy.
Very easy to like. Very easy. I also like the reference to Greater Manchester in there as well. Obviously.
Of course you do.
Of course it is. Coming from a small town.
Moving on to an album that I'm going to say from the start off, I really like, but I'm not going to say much about because it's actually really hard to talk about because it's not. I don't have the musical vocabulary to talk about it.
The
frankly.
vernacular.
Yeah, I'm going to be able to start.
Right.
This is the 6th album from Sault. We previously reviewed 3 of their earlier works.
Oh, we did.
9
Which you can't get anymore.
on podcast 5 last year. And then Rise and the Black Albums, which we kind of got round to at the end on the Christmas podcast of 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So this time around, the band, or basically Inflo, Aka, Dean, Josiah Cover, and friends, see the musician, producer moving away from regular contributors these had before, Little Sims, Mike and Kwanaka, Kid Sister, and suddenly we go all. Before we've been kind of funk and soul and various other things coming in, bit of kind of synth pop, bit of other things, and now we've just gone. Okay, we're going classical, choral, even operatic. Some times for this entire album. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
wow, is it still engaging? Absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah. What I like is it's almost impossible if anyone that appreciates music in all its forms and any kind of creative genius. And funny enough, I was watching a documentary last night, an Imagine program on BBC One about a guy called Jacob Collier, who I'd heard of but didn't know a lot about. A young guy who, again, falls in this category of just annoyingly creative and brilliant at a really young age and stuff like that. And I think Dean Cover especially fits into that same kind of thing. It's just like, it's hard not to be excited anytime Sault put a record out these days, because you know it's going to be something that's inventive, engaging, and genuinely interesting. And I think this album is no different. Similar to all the previous records, although perhaps not as obviously so because of the genre it's in. All the previous albums have been very much about celebrating the black cultural legacy, and that is still very much present here, and only became obvious to me when I was speaking to a friend who had also listened to the album, and she was talking about the final track of the 7 tracks, which is Lewis Higher, and the Luo people are from Kenya. So this is, I think this album, this track is meant to be about their certainly respecting part of the musical styles of their cultural heritage. And that's quite interesting because that's actually one of my favourite tracks on the album, because it has lots of plucking of strings going on, which oddly reminded me of Bella Fleck and Abigail Washburn, because it had that kind of almost banjo-y type thing going on because of the kind of pluckingness. But this whole album is just, you put it on, and particularly if you put it on and just turn everything else off. Again, it's not a long album, it's 40 minutes is done, and just sit there. It's just a joyous musical experience. And I came out there end and just listening to it with everything else going on and just smiling. And I thought, yeah, like this.
Yeah.
Very nice.
It's for a mostly instrumental album of operatic and classical music quality, which is far removed, but not that far removed, as you say, from their previous work. It's very enjoyable. It's really enjoyable. Really great listen. Great. I mean, the use of the choirs throughout. The way it sort of fits the tone of each track, and each track, even though it feels like a long piece of work with an interlude, which I'll come to, it does. You can sort of split it up into the sort of more traditional idea of an album with tracks, and as you say, the sort of connection to black music, the funk of those previous albums is still there very much. I mean, particularly was the interlude. The moment where we do get that burst of female vocals. Time is precious.
Yeah, time is precious. Yes.
You know, and it's I guess it's about 3/4 of the way through. You know, it sort of does make that connection back to their previous work, thematically. But it's very. If you're a fan of I guess if you're a fan of the band, if you're a fan of Sault, you're like you'll enjoy this because. You know, this is the tangents that they go off on, musically speaking. It's a really enjoyable record. I'm still sort of I've listened to this one a couple of times. I'm still sort of taking it in. I will listen to it again because I still want to sort of absorb it. I didn't know the reference to Kenya, and one of the more brass heavy tracks is one entitled June 55,
which is lovely,
which again shamefully, being British, don't know much about my colonial history. I'm guessing that's a reference as well. But there we go. Lovely.
Right, only 2 albums to go. We now move on to move back as opposed to rock. But actually, it's more rock. And the 6th album by Sheffield band Rolo Tomassi, an album that has been rated heavily by all the metal publications, hence why we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So with that perfect setup piece.
Okay. Oh, this album is fascinating. It really is. I very rarely, when we do this, I know you do. So Scott obviously does the work. He does the legwork. He does the research. I just come in and go, that was good. I actually had to do some research on this halfway through the album, because this is just. It's all over the place, but in a good way.
To be fair, I had to do the same research because. Occasionally, because I also basically I picked it because it was getting reviews without having heard the band before. I hadn't really listened to the band before, so I also came into it kind of blind, going, "Oh, okay."
Yeah, okay, and one review I read somewhere described, and I don't often look at that. Honestly, when we do these things, I don't look at other reviews because I want to come into it with my own thoughts. But one of the reviews I read used the word bipolar. I think that's the perfect description, because track by track, even lyrically, certainly musically, that's the perfect way to describe this album. It is 2 people singing, presenting, shouting, rolling. I can't even do it. Rolling. It's really good, and actually, you know, it begins so softly as well. It lures you in. I mean, the first track is almost it's a perfect, you know. Is it Eva, the lead vocalist?
Yes, Eva. Yes, Eva Corman. Although I actually think she might have changed the name because I think she married the main chappie in the band. So
that's just lovely. So there's, you know, it sort of coaxes you in. This is a beautiful vocal, lyric.
Lovely, ethereal. Yeah.
And she has such an ethereal voice. And then she can switch, and it is full on hardcore, metalcore, choking core. It's a growl. It's great to have a growl back on the podcast because I don't think we haven't done a hard metal growl for quite some time.
And it is our first female growl as well.
And it's our first female growl because that's the other thing that shocked me because when I listened to, I was like, this is her. This is the other thing I had to get my head around. It's like she's not just been brought in because we listened to these albums in the past and they're like, all right, we have this female vocalist comes in, sings this bit,
sings nice bit possible,
and then the dude comes in, he's like,
although I think the chap in the band does some.
He also sings as well.
Yeah, does some duetting growling.
But it's mostly her doing the growling. Anyway, but that's great. So yes, as I've written in my notes here, at this point I did do a little research, which I don't normally do. So the duality of the vocals, the duality of the music, the lyrics, runs throughout. It's a split personality of a band and an album, but that keeps things very interesting. So what can I pull out from this shambles of a split personality review? I really liked the song Drip, which I think is very...
See, you don't know what I wrote for Drip.
Drip, yeah, because it's
I wrote Drip gave me a headache.
Yeah.
Nin would be proud of that level of industrial
Yes, that's exactly
banging.
what I wrote. I was just like, it's the industrial rhythm, and it's the precision of that rhythm, and the industrial soundscape throughout that is very Nin. Prescience is all growl, all core throughout, until towards the end there's this sort of kind of almost lost guitar riff. And it's just like, it feels like it's on its own somewhere with all the madness happening around it. And the last couple of tracks as well, both maybe it took me a couple of times listening to this album to sort of realise this. So this is probably true of the rest of the album, but the last couple of tracks in particular I thought were very strong lyrically as well. And I thought, oh, okay, brilliant, what a way to end. That's it, that's me, I'm done.
Yeah, actually, besides, I think you might have liked this album slightly more than I did. But I remember having a conversation when we were out at I think when we were out going to see football a few weeks ago, and I'd said that
as we said at the beginning, we've been living life.
Yeah, that I put this album on.
Not podcasting.
That I put this album on, and they kind of started off, and I was going, oh, so they're kind of Wolf Alice type of band then. And this first track goes on, you're thinking, which is what's it called? Almost always.
Yes.
Which is like six and a half minutes. It's not just like it's a little bit of a track and then go.
Yeah.
It's like, you're going, okay.
It's a Wolf Alice sort of title as well.
This is quite nice.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you get into Cloaked.
Yeah.
And suddenly things get turned up to 11 and suddenly it's full on.
You do it much better than me.
Yeah. But I do quite like Cloaked. I think Cloaked's a really good.
Yeah, it's good.
Cloaked is really track.
Yeah.
Musically, it's really sound, and the
the
riffing's really good. As you said, we are not strangers to this genre of music because we have, bizarrely, I'm not sure why, but I think it's probably because, ironically, these days, the albums that tend to get reviewed well in the metal genre tend to be albums of this particular genre, so that's why we end up doing things. I think Behemoth, personal favourites of ours from back in the day.
Yes.
Prime examples of this. As you say, it's a weird album because it is that classic thing where you've got literally the melodic side, which is very melodic and very kind of thing, and then it's not even like, I wouldn't say it's not even like Slipknot kind of thing where you've worked because Slipknot's all kind of the same kind of thing, but just with growliness and then proper singing. Whereas this is literally almost another band doing the melodic side to the growly metal side. I think the clash between the two sides doesn't always work.
Not quite.
And I think which is a shame because I think the melodic side of it is really good. So they've got the chops on that. I think the riffing and stuff on the kind of metal side, full metal side of it, is not quite as strong for me. So in a way, the Wolf Alice bits work better than the Slipknot bits. So Closer, which is in the middle of the album, again is like the opening track is fairly kind of standard, kind of which is really really nice. But as you said, Drip, it's the standout because it is just like this is just like a. You're thinking, is anything else going to happen in this? It's like literally that 60 seconds. Well, it's probably actually more than that.
Yeah.
Got a minute and a half of just going. That's like hammering a nail in or something. It's just
a 9-inch nail.
Oh, very good. Ping. Whilst I'd say not really for me particularly, there was enough in it that I can kind of understand where the positive reviews are coming from it from the metal press.
Yes.
Good on them, apparently. As I said, we like a bit of metal. So
me too, occasionally.
Moving on to the final album. Looks like we're getting slow on the podcast tonight. We're into the 40s already.
Oh Christ! Let's go. Hurry up.
Yes.
Let's get it done.
Frank Turner with Frank Turner Hardcore. Now, this is the third time we have reviewed Frank. First time was back in 2015 for Positive Songs About Negative People on podcast 8. That was at the suggestion of Mr. Spencer, who kind of went, "Can you review that album?" I went, "All right, Spence, of course we can."
And we delivered.
So Spence, if you're still with us, here we are, third time around. We also reviewed the last album, No Man's Land, where he told us tales about strong women. That was the classic thing with, here's a man writing an album telling us how strong women are.
Yeah, it does ring a bell.
Yeah, which was the Xmas podcast, Christmas podcast, 2019. So he's back with this time a more kind of boisterous rocking collection of songs about.
Is he just?
Wanting COVID to be over so people can get together again, moving from London to the coast, a friend's suicide, giving up drugs, hating his dad transitioning to a woman, anxiety, being an arse generally, having regrets, family life, and a lot more. And you know what? For me, this is definitely the best thing.
I thought you were going to finish the podcast there. I thought we were done.
This is definitely the best thing we've reviewed from him.
Yes.
This blasts off full guitars blazing with non-severum, and then straight into The Gathering, where a certain Mr. Jason Isbell provides the guitar solo.
Oh, right, okay.
And this is a great song because it is a song about being in lockdown and how great it will be to be back together with people experiencing stuff.
Yeah.
Like gigs.
Yeah.
And we can attest to the fact.
We can attest to that.
That, I mean, our first one was the whole steady gig, unsurprisingly, for this podcast, and it was fantastic to be kind of like back in that environment.
Exactly.
Experiencing that.
Indeed.
And that kind of sets the tone for the record, really. It's just a full-on rocking, but actually surprisingly, again, lyrically inventive and interesting record. So you've got two songs about his father on the album, for example. First, Fatherless, which is a song about basically abandonment and about pretty much how much he hated his father.
So I mean, lyrically, it's awful.
Yeah, it is. Literally,
I mean, content.
Yeah, he just hates his father.
Yeah, hello.
And the second one, Miranda, is literally about love and reconciliation, and basically realization that whilst he absolutely hated his father, he actually does like Miranda, who's the person his father has now become. And there's a great line in that song that's not about the kind of Miranda's self bit, but there's a brilliant bit where he says, "The problem with carrying hate for someone who doesn't know, because you're the only one carrying the weight, better just let go and know who you are." And that is the kind of thing. It's just like if you're carrying hate for somebody or carrying even grudges for things, it's like you are the person literally carrying the thing. The person you're carrying the grudge against probably has no idea, living their life quite happily, doesn't give a toss. The only person suffering from that is you. I quite liked that. Similarly, lyric-wise, actually on because I have a child that has anxiety, and I've known friends that suffer from anxiety, haven't been doing so well, and deals with Turner's own issues of anxiety, partly through the lockdown and pressures of social media and stuff as well, which I found quite touching. Even more touching is Wave Across the Bay, which is a song remembering his friendship with Scott Hutchison of Frightened Rabbit.
Yes.
Who sent his life back in this time of year, actually May 28, 2018. Obviously, we saw Scott Hutchison supports the whole Steady, and I saw Frightened Rabbit support the other Scottish band.
And he was brilliant.
And again, just really, really touching, moving kind of thing. And there's just lots. What I like about his lyrical style, even than previous albums had, he does have a nice way of just throwing in stuff that's quite fun, relatable. As the album goes on, there's quite a lot of stuff about kind of home life and stuff, and about how you can, literally, it's like the work, perfect score, little life, about literally how you can be an arse, and your other partner goes, your other half kind of goes. It's like, no, okay, I apologise. I've put the washing on. I've put my own stuff in as well as yours. Put my own stuff
in as well as yours. Yes. I got that lyric.
Yeah.
I don't,
Oh, like, got stuff.
Yeah, it's involved.
I've now tied the garage up. It's
yeah.
And then it ends with "Farewell to My City," which is a song about him leaving London and deciding to move him and his other half to move to the coast. And it is a kind of a love letter to all his memories about London and stuff. Again, this rattles in another album that rattles in just over 40 minutes. I really, really like this album.
The Hold Steady are an influence here as well. I don't know if it's consciously or subconsciously, or maybe that's just us.
Maybe.
I mean, in the opening and closing track, they really came to the forefront of mind. Particularly in The Gathering, because obviously a song about getting together in a pub and singing, "Whee!" Very much them.
Yes.
And I did love that lyric, that first time, that first beat, the first piano chord that gets played, the first pint, it's going to be an absolute wild party. And I can attest to the fact I have been to one or two wild parties since we were all back together. If only I'd heard this song 2 years ago. And again, Farewell to My City at the end, similarly, the sort of tales of North London, particularly up the Northern Line through the Northern Lights as well. Very good. Although there was part of me thinking, oh, bloody millennials, moving to the coast. I was just like, it's on trend, isn't it? Well done you. But for the rest of us that are still here, I also liked The Resurrectionist, that sort of sense of growing up. We're all ordinary people. We're all children in the end, just trying to find our way in the world.
Yes.
Kind of ties back to what, Yardak was saying. We're all ordinary people, and there's a sort of celebration in the ordinary there. You've mentioned Wave Across the Bay, obviously. It's nice, and the work. It was amusing. I found it a bit like the previous album with him talking about Strong. I found that a bit cringe. I'll be honest. I found that a bit cringe. It's like relationship advice from Frank. Thanks for that. thanks for highlighting all the things that I'm not doing, because I don't already have that in my life, and I'm glad you were here, Frank Turner, to point out all the small things I'm not quite achieving in my house. But other than that, like you, I did enjoy this album.
So that's the end, and yeah, God, this is a long one.
Well, we're overdue a podcast. This extra listening.
We haven't done it for a while. Yeah. Okay, so album of the podcast.
I was going to say this was easy for me, but I've got to give an honourable mention to Yard Act, because had we reviewed them when we should have done, they would have been album of the podcast in January or February.
Yeah, almost certainly. Yes.
Almost certainly. Without a doubt, they are my album of the podcast. However, we've reviewed Wet Leg, and that's my album of the podcast.
Yeah, mine is probably a toss-up between Wet Leg and Frank Turner. But actually, it's a decent... Obviously, it was bigger pool to pick from for this podcast, perhaps. But yes, it was. There are things to recommend in all these records.
Absolutely, yes.
As we say. If only we get the sponsorship for that, that'd be good. Anyway, until next time, when we're reviewing albums, there will be next time, there'll be a shorter period of less than 4 months.
Commitment.
Exactly. We're reviewing new albums from people like Sigrid. There's a new album coming out.
Indeed.
So, until then.
Until then.
If you could click subscribe or follow us on wherever you're getting this podcast, that would be terrific. We'll see you again in about a month's time.